Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Billi FitzSimons.
I'm Sam Koslowski.
Today we are talking about greyhound racing, specifically whether or not there is a movement for it to be banned. Earlier this week, the Tasmanian Government announced it will ban greyhound racing in the next 5 years. The state cited concerns about animal welfare and declining viewership as key factors in the decision. And just yesterday, new costing analysis suggested that Victoria could actually save hundreds of millions of dollars if they were also to follow suit. But will that happen? Today, we will tell you everything you need to know.
So, Billi, over the last couple of years, I feel like greyhound racing regulation has come up relatively in a state-based context or a state and territory-based context here. Give me a sense of the state of play across the country.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I actually didn't know too much about this before I did this research. And I was quite surprised to learn that Australia is actually only one of 4 countries in the world where commercial greyhound racing still takes place.
Right.
And the last time we reported on this was basically this time last year.
Yep.
And then it was 7 countries that were still doing commercial greyhound racing. And since the past year, it has gone down to 4. Now, it is legal in basically all of Australia except for the ACT. And as I just mentioned in the intro, it's about to also be banned in Tasmania.
And in terms of the global greyhound racing landscape, where does Australia sit in terms of the size of that industry?
Well, Australia actually has the largest commercial greyhound industry in the world. So that's according to analysis. And I would say it's very popular in Australia amongst regional communities. That's where it's most popular. I tried to find a national number, but I couldn't quite find it in terms of how much revenue it's generating or how much it's contributing to the economy in Australia. I couldn't find a national number, but I did find a number just for New South Wales, where it is very popular. And so in 2023, greyhound racing contributed about $650 million to the economy just in New South Wales, just in that 1 year.
And is that mainly from gambling revenue that's associated with it?
Gambling revenue, from the jobs that it creates for the economy, from the prize money that it also has. There are a whole different range of things in terms of how it's contributing to the economy, but it is a really big industry. I also think it's fair to say that the industry is quite controversial. In particular, there are concerns around animal welfare. That's also not unique to greyhound racing. You know, we also have horse racing where there are also animal welfare concerns. And also with both of those, their association with the gambling industry. And also questions over whether the racing bodies are adequately regulated. But as of the past few weeks, there is a lot more conversation about the greyhound industry in particular and whether or not it should be banned.
And all of this is being brought into the news cycle in the last couple of days with Tasmania's announcement. And that's interesting because we have talked about Tasmania and its government in the last couple of weeks on this podcast because of the, uncertainty that was associated with their recent election. So there's a new premier who's the old premier, but he's back again for another term. And one of the first things he announced was relating to greyhound racing.
Yeah, that is important context and it's so confusing to follow. But yes, like you said, Sam, Tasmania does have the Premier Jeremy Rockliff, who has become Premier again. Very confusing because he doesn't actually have enough support to form government. But
such a funny situation.
It's such a funny situation. But like you said, what's important to know is that as of earlier this week, he has announced that Tasmania will phase out greyhound racing by 2029. So in a post to Facebook, Rockliff said that animal welfare and declining participation in the sport contributed to the government's decision. I'll read out one quote from him. He said, "I know there are many participants in the industry who care for their animals who will be extremely disappointed by this decision."
So he kind of assumes office. He is the premier of an uncertain government. And one of his first things he does is announces on Facebook this ban. I noticed that you said 2029. Why is that so long away?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
Yeah, that was my first question as well. And it's actually because of a pre-existing contract. So Tas Racing is the body that manages the racing industry in Tasmania, and that includes horse racing as well,
right,
and greyhound racing. And they have a funding arrangement with the government, which was signed back in 2009, and it was a 20-year deal.
Right.
So it doesn't expire until 2029. And I believe they say in the business world that a deal is a deal.
A deal is a deal.
A deal is a deal, and that's exactly why we
Right.
have to wait 5 years for this to happen. According to a report conducted by welfare advocacy organisations, Greyhound Racing received about $75 million from Tas Racing, or from the government, over the past 15 years since this agreement has been in place.
So just to get it clear, the government in Tasmania is essentially kind of subsidising the industry.
Yes.
And I assume the industry would be arguing back in 2009 at least that they need the funding to prop up local jobs and to kind of grow a part of the economy there. So what has the reaction been from that industry?
Yeah, from a lot of stakeholders within the greyhound racing industry, they have expressed their disappointment at this announcement. Like I said before, this industry creates a lot of jobs, it contributes to the economy. And so for a lot of people whose lives are really all about greyhound racing, you can imagine that this is a disappointing announcement for them. From Tas Racing themselves, they didn't actually say that much in their response. They basically just said that they note the announcement and that they will engage with relevant stakeholders to make sure that there is an appropriate phasing out of this.
And as you said in reading out the comments from the Premier with the announcement, the core argument here is about animal welfare. And so I'm keen to understand then what the reaction has been from the other side of this debate to industry, which is animal welfare organisations.
Well, as you can imagine, I mean, many of these organisations have been advocating for this ban to take place for years and years. And so from somewhere like RSPCA Tasmania, they really celebrated this news and said that this is because of all of the advocacy that has taken place over the past many, many years.
Sure.
And they used this announcement to urge other governments to, this is a quote from them, to treat this moment as a turning point and to speak in favour of ending greyhound racing once and for all.
And I think the big unsaid thing in this discussion, Billi, is the fact that, you know, we've got the ACT and Tasmania. They're relatively small economies in the scope of comparing it to other states in Australia, like that New South Wales number you mentioned at the top. Is there any indication from the other states, particularly those larger economies, that they'll follow suit here?
Yeah, well, just yesterday there were reports out of Victoria that the government could actually save money if it phases out greyhound racing.
So talk me through that argument then.
Yeah, so the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is just a government agency that, you know, any politician can go to and say, if this policy was introduced, how would that impact the economy?
A bit of modelling.
Yes, and so it was independent MP Georgie Purcell who asked the Parliamentary Budget Office to do the costings on if the Victorian government was to ban greyhound racing. And it found that it would save about $450 million over a 10-year period.
So that's a strong economic argument, but walk me
Yes.
through the numbers there. Like, how does that actually work out?
Okay, it's going to get a little bit messy, but stay with me. So it's because it would mean that the government would stop its partial funding of the industry. So remember how I said, just like in Tasmania, the government there partly subsidises the industry. It's the exact same in Victoria. And so it's estimated that if greyhound racing was to be banned in Victoria, that the government would decrease their expenses over a 10-year period by about $700 million. However, on the flip side of that, they would also lose revenue of about $250 million. And that is revenue that they earn from people betting on the industry.
Right. So the framework that sits behind that comment is this idea that gambling companies in Australia, they would pay taxes to the government.
Yes.
They would pay levies and different fees that are applied to the industry. That bucket of money would decrease if greyhound racing was taken out of play.
Exactly. So ultimately, the government would lose about $250 million in lost revenue. but they would actually also save about $700 million. And so the net gain would be $450 million.
That was very mathematically sound explanations. Okay, so this costing has been done by an independent MP in Victoria. Has the Victorian government responded, though, to this model?
No. So this only happened yesterday, but at the time of recording, the Victorian government has not responded to that costing analysis, but they certainly have showed no indication that they are wanting to ban greyhound racing. The other states where greyhound racing is really popular is Queensland and New South Wales. It's really a thing for the eastern states of Australia where it's most popular. And again, neither of those state governments have indicated any desire to ban greyhound racing. The one last jurisdiction I wanted to mention before we leave it, Sam, was New Zealand.
Oh, yeah?
They actually have banned greyhound racing, and it was only very recently. It was in December of last year.
Right.
So I think it does show that there is slowly kind of this movement to ban it.
Billi, I feel like this is one of these stories that has a pretty regular cadence in the news cycle, at least since we've started reporting the news every day here at TDA, where there seems to be these key moments. And I remember one key moment was a groundbreaking Four Corners episode produced by the ABC. I remember us talking about the ACT ban. Now we're here talking about Tasmania. It definitely feels like the gaps between those developments are getting a bit shorter.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting to see if there is more movement and more rapid movement in this area.
Yeah, so interesting.
Thanks so much for explaining that to us, and thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus this morning. Hope you've enjoyed this week of content. It's been a super busy week of news. We're going to be back in your ears for the Friday afternoon headlines. Until then, have a wonderful start to your Friday. We'll chat to you later.
Bye.